Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Play Like a Day.
Woo
As
woo.
always, Monica.
Sarah.
Yep. We're so glad to be here. So glad to be talking in the second episode of Play Like a Day. Very
Heck
exciting.
yeah.
Very exciting. How are you today, Sarah?
I'm fantastic. How about you?
I'm feeling really good. Feeling really
Good.
good. It snowed here
We got
yesterday,
heaps.
Wednesday. Heaps of snow, like 10 inches of snow. It's still there. It's really cold. Not my vibe. I don't live on the West Coast for that, but it's
Nah,
okay. It's not bad. It's actually very pretty. So, and the sun's
that's
out the next
nice.
few days. So we're chilling.
We
We're
love
chilling.
that. Yeah, we're
We were
like
not chilling for a minute.
dry as a bone here in New Jersey. We've got like
No.
zero snow. It's been like 60 degrees and like,
That sounds kind of nice though.
yeah, like I can't
But
complain.
weird.
And also like climate change kind of
Yeah.
freaks me out, but we're not going to talk about
We're
that
not
today.
going to
So,
talk about that. We're going to talk about gender. We're going to talk about gender.
yes.
Climate change for another day, because I feel that it's weird here too. Yes, we're going to talk about gender as we do on this podcast. And yeah, Sarah, do you want to tell them what we're going to talk about today? I'm excited.
I would love to. Okay, so how this sort of came up, we're going to be talking about being perceived today. And how this sort of evolved was when I got a buzz cut.
Yeah.
I
Recently.
texted, yeah, very recent, like a week ago, 2 weeks, yeah, a week ago. Anyway, I texted Monica and I was like, and my first thought was, how are people going to perceive me? And so I think that's like a big conversation because like no matter what your gender expression is or what you look like to other people, people are always going to perceive you. And I think in
Unavoidable.
society it's so unavoidable. And I think in the world we live in, we want to perceived in a way that makes us feel the most safe. I think that's like human nature,
Yeah.
right? And so what does that mean when it comes to the binary of gender and then also the non-binary of gender? So
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting conversation to have.
Ooh, it's a great conversation. And yeah, being perceived is unavoidable. And I think we'll probably talk about how I feel about it now versus how have felt about it
Mhm.
in the past, which is very different. Um,
Yes.
but yeah. Do you want to kick us off? We
Yeah.
were like voice messaging about this last week because it's something we both think about a lot, I think. I don't want to speak for you, but I think about it a lot.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And like even when um I had like hair down to my waist like 3 years ago. And then I like chopped it all off and got like a, quote unquote men's haircut.
Sure.
And then a week ago, I decided to like get a buzz cut because I've been thinking about it for a long time. So I just did it. But it's so interesting that in those stages, there were different fears that I had around being perceived, right?
Yeah.
And like as on the outside, presenting as more femme when I had hair down to my waist,
Yep.
um, I'm sorry, my dog is like eating a bone.
No,
One
go
sec.
for it.
That was really loud and unnecessary. Okay.
Oh, wait, I couldn't hear it for the record.
Oh, well, that's good. So being perceived when my hair was really long and I was sort of like outwardly more femme, I got a lot of attention from men.
Mm-hmm.
And I think being raised as a girl, you're very attuned to and kind of like are socialized to like want the male gaze, right?
Yeah.
But in those
Attribute it with
situations, I
self-worth.
feel yes,
Yeah.
yes, 100%. And in those situations, I felt really uncomfortable most of the time because I am a pretty like muscular person.
Mm-hmm.
But when I had long hair, people were like always commenting on my body. Like men were always commenting on my body, which made
Yeah.
me feel really uncomfortable. And other things too. Then when I chopped my hair off, my fear on being perceived was men aren't going to look at me the same.
Yeah.
And I was like, why do I think that? And I'm gay. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Which is a
And
whole
so
different
there's
like situation than me,
oh
who's
my, it's,
not, I'm bi, I'm not straight, but I'm
right.
also still interested in men, which is like a totally, yeah, it's different situation.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear your things around that too. Like when you decided to um, cut all your hair off.
Yeah.
But when and then I did a lot of unpacking around like the male gaze and why I like was seeking that attention and but I didn't want the attention. It's this whole like inner turmoil, thrashiness. I think that is not an
Thrashiness.
insular experience to me, right?
Yeah.
So that was that, work through it. And then I found once I sort of like went through it, came out as gay, sort of like started to live into the gender expression that felt most comfortable for me, it felt more comfortable to be around men.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't seeking that kind of attention from them anymore.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't trying to like perform for them, right? And then recently when I shaved my hair off, my first thought was, like, am I going to get hired for a job? And not that I'm necessarily seeking for a job, but why
Yeah.
that was my first thought.
Yeah. It's so
Because I think
interesting.
like, yeah, like I think, well, I know that a lot of that came from like men typically have the hiring power in corporate America, right?
Yeah.
And I had this fear around being like pushed out, like in the out group
Yeah.
rather than like belonging to a community. So this whole thing and how that relates to sports. And I
Yeah.
think like when I had my long hair, I was playing sports in college, you know, all through high school, all of that, presenting as a girl, presenting super femme. And it's like I wonder what my experience would have been if I decided to sort of live into my outward gender expression sooner.
Yeah. Ooh. Me too. Same. I was just thinking about that. I had long hair through playing in college, and then I cut my hair pretty young considering. I think I first cut it when I was 24 or 25, like cut it off to
Okay.
be like a shorter. It was an evolution for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, just talking about being perceived and gender expression, I think hair has a lot to do with it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It comes with a lot of assumptions for people, definitely, which I feel like hopefully we can shake at some point. But
Yeah.
I went like bob, and then I went like pixie cut, and then I went bowl cut, and then eventually I just like busted off when I was 25. So
Mm-hmm.
we're at like 11 years of doing this on and off, and I've never,
Yeah.
I know it's so long. And sometimes I'd go full years with a buzz cut. Sometimes I'd like grow it out to like a pixie cut or like a bowl cut or something. But then I always come back to like, this is my look. Like, this is what makes me feel the most like me. And maybe that'll change. All this is fluid, which is like cool. But right now it's like the buzz cut. And when I first did it, the interesting thing is like, I figured people would, I don't know. People always have approached me like I'm more masculine in
Mm.
general since I was a teenager, which I was fine with. I think we talked about last time, like, the tomboy label. I was like, oh, okay, that feels better than, being a girl. That feels more like it, even though it didn't replace it. I was like, oh, kind of leaning into that. So then when I buzzed my head, I felt more feminine than I ever had before, which was like a really
Interesting.
interesting feeling. Yeah.
I
Like
love
really
that.
interesting. And I think part of it was like I wasn't hiding behind my hair anymore. And that was
Mm.
able to kind of bring, those things are binary, but a different like dichotomy of like those things in those like, identities in my life. Which was really cool. I remember feeling just like relieved and being like, "Oh, this is like where I want to be." But the expression of that, like if I could have done that in high school, if I would have known, I didn't know anyone in Texas in high school or college who had a buzz cut. No one, absolutely
I'm
not. Like I
sure.
can't even remember meeting anyone except for, not anyone who's obviously men, but not anyone who um could have been like, as far as I know, non-binary. I didn't know any non-binary people, so I don't know. I have like zero idea. But women for sure not. So it didn't feel like an option, which we've talked about how that was like, very just not cool to grow up
Mm-hmm.
and do like not have any other options. But if I was able to do that, like when I see like athletes now, in college and like high school with like, shorter hair and expressing their gender, I'm just like, oh man, I'm just just like
Yeah, like hell,
rooting
like
so hard. Like hell yeah,
yes.
like lean into that, and I think for me, yeah, the buzz cut is my expression, and it's like people are like, "Oh, it's your thing." Like people don't
Mm-hmm.
assume like I'm non-binary because I have a buzz cut. That just it doesn't people don't
Sure.
perceive me immediately like that, but for me, I'm like I'm perceived now as like the person that I am, the person that I want to be, instead of like being perceived, like you were saying, when I had long hair, as like a woman, and getting more attention from men, and that being like the self-worth piece that we're just conditioned to have. And then really like deconditioning that, like as I had short hair for like more and more years, and being like, not that it's like not that it doesn't exist just because I have short hair, not that it doesn't happen, but it's like it is something where I was like, oh cool, it's not, I'm not fitting this really femme mold, so it's not happening all the time, and I get more time to like unpack why I would seek that, and then also like be like, oh, I actually don't need it. I actually feel better being who I am and being perceived as whatever people want to perceive me as this, because this is who I am, and it feels good to just be like, okay, you can think I'm whoever I am. Whatever identity you feel like putting on me is fine, because I know who I am. And if you're curious,
Mm,
you can ask me and I'll let you know, and I will like explain it a little more if you want to, but at this point I really can't spend my time and energy worrying about whether people are perceiving me the way that I perceive myself.
that's so powerful.
Right.
I hope people like get to that point in their lives where they're like, I know who I am and I am going to be perceived by people, and like I can't control what they think about me, you know?
No, can't
That's
spend
so
time worrying
powerful
about
to
it.
hear that. No,
Yeah.
no.
But then there's the safety issue also,
Yes,
which is like a whole
absolutely.
other thing. And like I've
Absolutely.
definitely felt unsafe many times in my life. But the interesting thing about it is like I felt unsafe even with long hair, and not even just like in the way that women do, that women have to deal with all the time, that, but also just as a more masculine person, like feeling unsafe around men who were threatened by that. And like
Mm,
it happens less now for some reason, even though my hair is like shorter and shorter. But I think also like I think it is that like I know who I am, and also, you know, I live on the not that we're not like safe on the West Coast all the time, but I do live in the Portland, Oregon area, and is like less of a thing that I've had to deal with since like moving up here, and even being in LA, I did a little more than here. So I'm lucky to be in a situation where I feel like safety can be less of an issue. But yeah, I mean, being perceived as genderqueer, non-binary, trans is like, yeah, can be a very unsafe thing when you're expressing yourself the way you want to. It's a very double-edged sword.
that yes, that is so true. I was having this conversation on TikTok, and someone left a comment of like they said it's helpful to recognize that like changing your hair may bring up like safety issues. And at first
Hmm.
I was like angry at the comment because I was like, yeah, but I'm not like, are you saying that because like I wasn't really sure why they were saying that at first, and then I sat
Yeah.
with it and I like thought about it, and
Mm.
yeah, like obviously that brings up safety issues, and I'm lucky enough to live in an area very similar to yours. I live on the
Yeah.
East Coast, very like
Yep.
10 miles outside of New York, where it's like very accepting, very liberal, lots of different kinds of people. Like this isn't necessarily abnormal where I live,
Yeah.
and I'm very lucky for that. And when I've traveled other places, like even when I was coaching softball and
Yeah.
I had my like short hair, I didn't like to go down to like southern states and be alone. Like
Yeah.
if we were like going out to dinner, walking around or whatever, because that felt very unsafe for me.
Yeah.
Um, it's just like it is like being perceived also definitely is a huge
Yeah.
safety issue. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And even, yeah, when I grew up in Texas, and I don't, you know, for the record, I love the state of Texas. I grew up there. There's a lot of great things about it. I'm not talking shit. But there is the reality of politics there, and what people have been conditioned to believe about people like me and other genderqueer folks, and many other folks, both, since we're talking about this. But even like having long hair and people perceiving me as a woman, like I said, like being a more like masculine energy, like brought very unsafe conditions to me, more so even when I
Mm-hmm.
had long hair than short. And then now it's like, yeah, thinking about that very much so, like when I'm in areas where I'm like, ooh, like I'm not just gonna like, you know, go out there and like act like I'm just safe
Yeah,
everywhere,
no.
because of how people perceive me. And a lot of people perceive me, and like, you know, perceive me as queer, which I am.
Yeah,
But also that's not safe everywhere. So,
sure. Of course.
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I do want to go back to like being perceived in your sport too, because this
Yeah.
memory just popped up in my head when it's, I think in a lot of ways, sports are a place where people may feel, especially in women's sports, I think they're a place where people may feel more okay to like come out and like
Yeah.
live as who they are. I think men's sports is there's a little bit more,
Yeah.
nuance to that.
Yep.
Um and still like there definitely is a binary inside of that space. And what I mean by that is like I remember, which is like real fucked up, and you
Yeah.
can like bleep that out if you need
Yeah.
to.
No. No.
Like I remember being in the dugout and watching the other team play
Mhm.
defense. And
Mhm.
whenever there was a girl who like a girl, I don't actually know if they were a girl,
Yeah.
a person with shorter hair, like maybe, looked gay, whatever that means.
Yeah.
We would talk about that in the dugout. Like, oh my God,
Mm.
look at the shortstop, or like look at the center fielder. And it was like so fucked up now that I think
Yeah.
back about like that's so homophobic. And
And
it's like
internalized
either
probably too.
oh my God, like
Yeah.
so much internalized homophobia. And like
Yeah.
100% I was there and like in it
Yeah.
before I unpacked any of that shit. But it's like you look a certain way and
Mhm.
so you are this.
Yeah.
And then the other players who had like long hair in the bows, like they were on the other side. So even in that
Yeah.
community, like there is a binary and like you're gay,
Yep.
you look gay, you have
Yeah.
short hair and like wear sunglasses. And then like you have the femmes who
Yeah.
like, and so
Are
even
obviously
in,
automatically straight.
yeah, automatically, like
Automatically.
no questions
Automatically.
asked.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to think about that too, because it's like you and people like talk shit about that. And so like, is it safe sometimes in the like on those teams in those communities? Like,
Not always.
I think that is a major reason why people, at least I'm gonna say, like our generation, I
Yeah.
think Gen Zers in a lot of ways, I mean, I think Athlete Ally, my bad, came out with a study of I think like 17.2% of Gen Zers identify as queer, and I think like 7.3% of millennials identify as queer now. So
Yeah.
like even with that,
Oh,
10
it's so
point
small.
difference, it feels like they feel a little bit more okay to like come out and live as they are at a younger
Yeah.
age and all of that stuff. So I'll say for millennials, like um I think it still felt very unsafe to
Mhm.
present, the way that people wanted to present because of the assholes in the dugouts being
Yeah.
like, that girl's gay, like,
Mhm.
and like just being so homophobic and awful.
Yeah.
So
And even
anyway,
just like not only assuming like people with long hair and bows are automatically straight, they're also automatically cis, of course. Like
yes,
that's just the
yeah,
automatic. And that's like being perceived like we have short hair and I definitely have a more masculine energy. But then there's the other side of it where you can be femme and non-binary and people are gonna perceive you um, probably automatically like a woman, and that probably sucks too.
hmm,
And it's like
absolutely,
there's that side of things. And I think I mean, I played many sports, but in my main sport, basketball, I think we've talked about this, how it feels a little less binary. Like we were able to kind of just like, be playing together, men, women, gender queer people. At that point, I didn't know who. But there's definitely an element of that, but I think it was definitely more, it felt more accepted than what you're talking about in softball. I
mm,
played softball,
yeah,
but I think I stopped when I was like, I don't know, like 12 or something. So hadn't really like gotten into that side of my identity, or anyone really, I think, had at that point. But yeah, it definitely felt more accepting. Definitely, I don't remember doing that or having people do that around me, which was interesting
hmm,
because, being in Texas. But I think, yeah, for some reason, our team was just like, even if it was unspoken, we're like, okay, like, it was just kind of something that was unspoken, and that's okay. But then like being able to mix with like playing with men, and things are very binary. Like, look, there's definitely been like Sedona from Oregon definitely pointed out the
Yeah.
like binary of like men's and women's basketball, like even at March Madness at the NCAA tournament, and how like
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely an equality and equity issues there. um
Absolutely.
and when it comes to like being who I was in the game of basketball, like if I would have known more who I was, I think I would have felt empowered to do that. It feels more like a space where I could do it. And if anyone like has, yeah, opinions or experiences around that, please let us know, because I'd love to know other folks' experiences. And I know it's very like nuanced and varied on where you were and who you were around and all those things, but I've just felt like I could be myself more within the game of basketball and not like be thought of in any way.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I love about sports too. And I think a lot of, I don't know, maybe not everybody has these thoughts, but I think I talked about this a little bit on our first episode too. Is like when I was playing, it wasn't like I was a girl playing,
Yeah.
you know?
I was just
It's
playing.
like just playing. Like I have a good arm. Like I can hit
Yeah.
the ball really hard. And like that's what it was. It wasn't like I can hit the ball hard for a girl. Um,
Yeah.
and so
Or for a
I
they.
don't
It's
know.
like
Or
we're
for
just a
they.
person, we're just a person playing. Let's play like a they, because, that's like, that's who we are. But like it's just like I'm just a person playing. It's not
Mhm.
good for a girl, it's not good for a non-binary person. It's like I'm just good.
I wonder how many people have those thoughts though. Like I really wonder like if cis het like women
Yeah.
think of themselves as like I play like I'm a women's softball player,
Yeah.
or do they think of themselves, and even men too, like I am I'm like a player. Like
Mm.
I wonder how many people have the like non-gendered thoughts of like I'm a good athlete,
Oh, like
or like do they
people in the
have
binary.
gendered? Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good question. Because for
curious.
me, I was always like, I'm a basketball player, but I didn't
Hmm.
feel like I fit in the binary. So if you do and you're watching this, let us know. Does that like really play into the identity, and just think, oh, I'm a women's basketball player, I'm a men's basketball player? We all know the classic problem is that it's basketball and women's basketball, or
In women's basketball, yeah,
s-
just like with everything
soccer
else.
and women's soccer, or
Yeah.
like, which is the problem. And so I like to say men's basketball or women's basketball. There's not the
Hmm.
default, there's no default. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to know if people feel that way too. I think like now, gender expression wise and being perceived, like I think about it even less, which is relieving.
That's
And
awesome.
also I realized, like, when I stopped playing competitively so much, how much being an athlete was a part of like my gender expression and my identity, which is part of why we're doing this, because it's like being athletic, being strong, working out. And, I've had a lot of gaps in that because of like mental health stuff, is like when I don't do it, I'm not feeling myself. And that is like a really
Yeah,
interesting existence inside myself too. Because then it's like,
yeah,
ooh, it's not only that I'm not exercising for my mental health or physical health, it's also, it affects my like how I'm perceived and my gender expression and how I feel in my body in that way.
yeah. That's interesting too. I think that's important. I think it's important for people who, if that brings you a lot of joy and like, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like self-realization, or like
Yeah.
being like a fully expressed
Gender
human, like
euphoria.
don't ever stop. Like do the
No.
things that bring you those kinds of feelings. Um, one other thing about being perceived, I think sometimes it's really beneficial too. I think like last year on national like women's sports day or whatever it was, I wrote a post about being a coach, and I was
Mm,
like, I really loved, coaching these athletes, and I don't know if I left any kind of impression on them or
yeah.
impact or whatever. I hope I did in some small way, but
Yeah.
I'll never know. I just know that I had a really good experience.
Yeah.
And a few players actually reached out to me on that post, and they were like, you did leave an impact. And
Oh, that's
a few
awesome.
in particular were like, I'm so glad that we had you as like a representation, because I think they weren't, out on the team.
Yeah.
And I think that brought me a lot of joy too, was to hear that like representation matters, and being
Yeah.
perceived sometimes is a very positive thing, um, for the people who may
Yes.
are like questioning or trying to figure out, or don't have never seen somebody like me who could look like me or choose to look like me, choose to wear certain clothes, choose to cut my hair a certain way, choose to, be
To
who I
break the
am. Because
binary.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, break the binary. And I think it is a choice to either to like choose to be you. Um, so I think that's cool too.
It's totally cool. I love that I get to make that choice, and it brings it like kind of full circle of like why we're doing this. Like, hey,
Yeah.
we out here. We want to be here talking about
Yeah.
this for other folks who are feeling this way, and hopefully make an
Absolutely.
impact.
Yes.
Yes, outside of the sports we play,
Yeah.
which is awesome. Um,
Hmm.
I think that's a good place to
Yeah.
wrap up.
Same. Hmm.
Awesome. Well, thanks y'all for listening. Um, we want to hear what you think. Please comment for sure. Let us know. And also at Play Like a Day on Instagram, you can let us know there in the DMs. And we'll see you next week.
Catch you later.
Bye.